Yes,
Yay!
What is up, everybody? Happy Monday.
That's just like my standard. Yay!
Yeah, it's gone from like us cheering at the same time to just Kim like, all right, cool.
Yay, we're here.
Happy Monday, everybody. I hope that you had a fantastic weekend. Kim and I did. It was great. It's also about 95 degrees in this house, so we have about 3 minutes of air. Hopefully that will survive the rest of the show. Yeah, LA's basically turned on the furnace. So welcome to Ginger Runner Live, episode number 157. Like, I've been looking forward to this one for the last couple of weeks because this is a guy that I've met a couple of times in person. Reigns from the Northwest, which is obviously both mine and Kim's home, and we cannot wait to move back. Future home soon to be
coming.
Yes, which we can't wait for. But our guest tonight is I don't know what to label him because I think he kind of expands beyond the label of ultra runner or adventure racer because he kind of does all of it. An absolute badass, airborne ranger, now back here in the United States and works a full-time job, but has a family and just adventures around the world and does some of the craziest, most epic stuff. Our guest tonight, Gavin Woody, is joining us from Seattle, actually. So it's going to be a great show. I can't wait to talk all about this guy's accomplishments. And he basically is fresh off one of those accomplishments called GODZone. Just the name of that is like, it's pretty ominous. So welcome, everyone, to Ginger Runner Live, episode number 157 with Mr. Gavin Woody. Here we go.
Ginger Runner.
Yeah, what's up, everybody? Welcome to Ginger Runner Live, episode number 157. Are we not cheering together anymore? Because
I was getting you back for not cheering with me in the intro, so I just stared at you.
I'm so glad that we're starting the show off that way. What's up? My name is Ethan Newberry, aka the Ginger Runner, and I'm joined here by my side by
Kim Tashima Newberry.
Make sure
and some beer.
And some beer. I will be hosting the show. What an odd start. But Kim will be in the chat room, of course.
And I think that's why I was distracted and I didn't cheer because
You
I
were in the
actually
middle.
was typing into the chat room. So as always, you guys, I will be keeping my eyes in the chat room. So if you have questions for our guests, please ask them there.
And who is our guest? I am honored to have him on. He's an absolute badass. As I mentioned kind of in the pre-show, Reigns from the Northwest, currently coming to us live from Seattle, fresh off the heels of just an incredible adventure race. I don't even know if I can label it as an adventure race, but we're going to, called GODZone. And of course, our guest can correct me if it's labeled something more intense, because we're going to show you some footage tonight that he collected during this event. And it seems a bit beyond what a normal human would consider adventure. His accomplishments range from completing UTMB, Cascade Crest, White River 50 miler. He's applied to Barkley numerous times. He gave me some of his resume, and let's just kind of put this out there. He won Bigfoot 200 in 2015.
No big deal.
No big deal. He finished Tour de Gion in 118 hours. John Muir Trail completed that, 223 miles, completed that in 4 days and 4 hours. This is a cool one. The Pigtails Challenge in Washington State. He was first placed with the 100-mile distance, the 150-mile distance, and the 200-mile distance. So sitting at 100-mile completion, the Dragon's Back, Hurt 100, Western States, DRTE 100, Plain 100, third place, Badwater 135, Boston Marathon, multiple. I mean, he gave me this, like I could go on and on and on. And so a lot of these accomplishments aren't listed on Ultra Runner or was it Ultra Sign Up or any of those kind of places because they're beyond that. So welcome
these
to
are like extreme, like these are
they're extreme.
Yeah.
And in addition to that, he's an airborne ranger, served in Iraq, and I want to talk to him a little bit about that because I'm curious if that connected somehow to his now adventure spirit. And I'm just excited to welcome to the show. Without further ado, Mr. Gavin Woody. I'm so sorry about the long intro, but yay! Gavin, yay!
Hey, thanks, guys.
You've been super patient. I wanted to make sure that we shouted out as many of your accolades as possible because, dude, you've done so much.
Oh, thanks.
You're fresh off of the GODZone. Can you kind of explain what GODZone is?
Yeah, first of all, it's a funky name, and I'd never heard of it. I'd heard of Primal Quest and Eco Challenge and things like that. You know, these big, expedition length races.
Right.
So it was up to 7 days. You have 7 days to complete the course. It's a 4-person team, co-ed, at least one female on the team. And GODZone specifically takes place in different areas around New Zealand. So this is the 6th GODZone, and it happened out of Queenstown on the South Island of New Zealand.
Just gnarly. So let's take a couple steps back here for a second. You were an Army Ranger, Airborne Ranger. For what years did you serve? And I know that you came back to the United States and you started to kind of pursue this outdoor lifestyle. What was the connection there, or was it something that you wanted to continue to pursue outdoor endeavors, or kind of what was your experience coming back to the States?
Yeah. So I had gone to West Point, grew up in California, doing Boy Scout, Eagle Scout stuff. And so that's kind of what first started me into the outdoors, and some, what I thought at the time were like these epic, backpacking trips, 50 miles over a week sort of thing. And then, went to West Point, served in Italy. That's where I was stationed with the Army as an infantry officer. And then we actually parachuted into Iraq at the beginning of the war back in 2002, and then spent a couple of years there before coming back to California for grad school. And so I just have been fortunate to kind of pursue different kind of long adventures in the mountains, while still, having a family and a full-time job here in Seattle.
When you were serving, was there an element, I don't want to call it adventure, but was there an element of like survival and that sort of thing that you were drawn to while you served? Or was it, when you came back, was because you couldn't, you just didn't want to deal with that side of things anymore, and you wanted to kind of pursue a different type of adventure? Is there a connection there at all?
Well, sure. I mean, I joined the Army because I wanted to, basically jump out of airplanes and do really hard stuff. And so that's why I went to, became an infantry officer, went to Ranger school, went to Airborne school, and, especially Ranger school. I mean, you basically carry heavy things through the woods and don't sleep or eat too much. And it's kind of actually what I'm doing now a lot of. And so in that respect, Ranger school was probably the best preparation for ultra running. And, these kind of long, kind of things in the mountains. And so, and then it's combat is tough. And when I came back home and got out of the Army, I wanted to be part of something more constructive, and, was able to enter the business world, and then, get involved with a nonprofit here in Seattle, which I volunteered with, called the Mountaineers. And so it was another kind of part of my development was, alpine climbing, and, basically just being able to be comfortable on any medium in the mountains, and then taking kind of my running background and then kind of applying that to bigger objectives in the mountains. So that's been kind of, a synopsis of my transition over time into what I've been doing now.
And I'm super curious as to, when you came back, did you jump all in? Like, was it, let's do 100 miles, like this is something that I can do? Or was it like a gradual feeling it out, run your road marathon, like the typical path that you see ultra runners take, which is running some long distance road race and then dabbling in a 50K or, that traditional route? Or were you just all in?
No, I'm very incremental, and I would actually call myself risk averse. I really like to take things in stages and basically do things that I think I can do. And over the past couple of years, I've gone kind of outside my comfort zone and failed at a couple of things, which has actually been a good learning experience I can talk about. But no, I did my first marathon back at West Point for my senior year, and it was the Marine Corps Marathon, and I'll never forget it because my finish line photo was me puking green line, and it was terrible, and my legs were locking up. It was really bad. So I was like, okay, check that box, never doing it again. But then, just like probably a lot of fans of the Ginger Runner, you forget over time how painful the experience was, and then you start doing things again. So fast forward a little bit, I went to Ranger School, Airborne School down in Georgia, and then started running more. Just as part of being part of the Army, you run a lot. And then once I got to Italy, I actually got in with some friends who would do marathons at different cities around Italy and Europe on the weekend. So you go down on Saturday to Florence and then pick up your race packet, cruise around the town, and then Sunday run a marathon through Florence. Like, it's totally awesome. So got to do that for a couple of years before. Then I started getting into biking, and then I wanted to do Ironman. So I kind of put all those pieces together and did Ironman Austria, and then I went on to do 3 or 4 Ironmans overseas and then in the States here. And so, yeah, I kind of like the longer stuff and kind of all these different components, because I've never been like really good at one particular thing, but kind of piecing things together is exciting for me. And then once I was back in the States after Stanford, I started trying to work on my marathon speed and qualified for Boston a few times and ultimately ran a sub 3 at Boston, which was super cool. But then I was kind of like, I want to do something else. I want to go longer. And so chucking at 50K, I did on my right around my 33rd birthday. And so, and I turn 40 tomorrow, actually. So, it's really
happy early birthday.
Thanks. So, it's been, I guess my ultra running has been, over 7 years, but it was very measured, like, 50K, then White River 50 mile, and then ran the Grand Canyon. But then I kind of took a big leap into kind of this, I would say, the multidisciplinary world. I did this thing with a couple buddies called the Rainier Triple Threat. So we, and not a lot of people know about it, but basically it was 2 friends, one who'd done hard rock and a bunch of other, super hard runs. And the other guy was a North Face sponsored ultra runner. So Sam Thompson and Brock Gavery. And we biked from Seattle down to Paradise or Mount Rainier, which is about 115 miles. And then we climbed Rainier, and then we ran the Wonderland Trail. So all kind of we slept about 4 or 5 hours total over the 80 hours. So that was pretty epic because
wow,
I'd only run 50 miles prior to that. And so the 93-mile Wonderland Trail was pretty stiff.
I mean, just because we know Mount Rainier, we have the video following Gary's FKT, knowing the Wonderland, and that, the Wonderland in and of itself is a monster. I mean, I think it was 26,000 gain or something with 93 miles or whatever the stat is. It's nuts. Plus summiting the mountain, which is always risky, but also just a monster because it's 14,000+ feet with glaciers and all sorts of crazy stuff. And then the bike ride. Gavin, way to just jump into the deep end there. That doesn't sound like a very easy one to just kind of take off right at the bat. Oh, we got a great profile, by the way. Not like
I know,
like an evil villain. I like that look. It's very much like a super villain.
If I don't move enough, the light turns off.
Oh, got it.
My team always makes fun of me because the light in my office turns off. I got a little drinking bird, one of those like perpetual motion things, but it doesn't work. I need to figure something else out.
Well, it gave you a great like ominous presence, so there's nothing wrong with that.
So the triple threat was kind of a big, it was like, kind of jumping in the deep end, and then, but I guess, in my mind, I mean, I'd run 50 miles before, I'd biked, done Ironmans and stuff. So, I had that, and then at that point, I think I'd climbed Rainier 4 or 5 times. So, I mean, I had, each of those components. And so that's what made me feel like it was not like super crazy.
Got it. We have lots of questions here coming in from the live audience. I want to remind those of you who are watching live.
Yeah, so I was just going to say, I just have a couple comments to make. One, everybody in the chat room is freaking out over your resume, your list of your races. Everybody, like, people are like, how have we not heard of Gavin before? Like, this is incredible. So you have a lot of new fans out there, Gavin. And two, we also have a lot of brand new viewers joining us tonight.
Cool.
So welcome all of you new viewers. If you don't know how this works, we're obviously live. If you have questions for our guests, please ask them in the chat room and I'll be polling them throughout the show.
Yeah, we always love having brand new guests. We tend to get a bunch every episode, but we have a welcoming community here that's probably already in the chat room. Don't be turned off because there are some inside jokes. I'm sure those are probably already jumping around in there. But our guest tonight, Gavin Woody, does have an impressive resume, probably one of the most impressive that we've had on the show before. One of the reasons why we are excited to have him on finally. Did you have a question?
Yeah, a question from Randy in the chat room. Do you have any life outside of all of these adventures? Seems like you would have no time for anything due to all your training.
I think it's a great question because, yeah, Gavin, do you have a life outside of the adventures?
Well, that's what's, I mean, kind of funny because I actually think this is just a very small component of what I do. So I have two young kids, or my wife and I, have two young kids. So my son just turned 2 and our daughter is 4.5, and they're so much fun. But also, you know, they're, I mean, they, you know, take a lot of time, and it's actually really fun time. I mean, you know, and that's where, you know, my priorities are, you know, they change over time. And like a couple weekends ago, it would have been a great day to go ski touring in the mountains. And actually skiing, like backcountry skiing, is kind of my favorite thing to do. So I actually consider myself a skier more than a runner.
Wow.
And so, you know, it would be a great day to go touring, but my daughter, she was just learning to ski. And so we went out and had an awesome day in the mountains, you know? And so that's for me, like, you know, where I'm most excited about spending time in, you know, outside with my kids. And, you know, I'm really fortunate to, that my wife, Sarah, you know, is also really game to take the kids out on adventures. And, you know, we took our daughter down to Patagonia when she was, I guess, 7 months old, and did the W Trek, which is like 40 or 50 miles, you know, and she carried our daughter and I carried all of her backpacking gear, and we, you know, did this big week-long backpacking trip. So, I mean, you know, the kids are really the center of our life, and it's super fun. But then I also work a full-time job. I'm the vice president of operations for a company in Seattle. We help people find senior care. So it's kind of like a cross between Expedia and a real estate broker, but trying to find a community, because there's lots of people out there who need help with assisted living or Alzheimer's care. And so we help people find the right community to go into. So yeah, I you know, commute every day down to the Columbia Tower where I am now, and work, and yeah, it's pretty busy. So
funny that Gavin actually works in the same building that my dad works in. You
Oh,
guys
really?
probably know each other. Yeah, you guys are probably like best
Okay.
friends. That's funny. You said Columbia Town. I was like, that's where my dad lives.
Yeah.
Where my dad works. You mentioned growing up in California. You mentioned your family, obviously, and I think this is something that I wanted to touch on at some point, and this is a perfect time. But how important was the outdoors and being a part of that for you when you were younger, and how important is that for you to, you know, help your kids see? Because the Northwest is this paradise for outdoor enthusiasts. You know, how important is that to get them outdoors and to get them active?
Yeah, it's super important. I mean, I grew up not on our family's cattle ranch, but close by. I was just about an hour away, and so I spent pretty much every weekend, you know, up there cutting wood and fixing fence, and learn how to be a plumber and a welder and electrician, and, you know, and just the value of hard work that my grandfather and grandparents and parents taught me. You know, I mean, a lot of it was centered on just being outside and being kind of multidisciplinary, again, because, I mean, as a rancher, you have to be a little bit of everything. So, you know, and then my parents, even though we didn't spend a lot of time going on camping trips or whatever, they encouraged me, or they, you know, helped me be part of the Boy Scouts. And that's where, you know, I did learn, you know, and I loved camping trips and, you know, carving wood and, you know, lashing stuff together and going out on these backpacking trips. And yeah, I want the same thing for my kids. And so, I'm really excited about being in the Pacific Northwest. We moved up here. We moved up after grad school just to check it out, basically. We thought it might be a cool place to be. And, now I tell people, like, when I go on vacation, I want to go to Seattle because it's so awesome. But nobody else moved here because traffic is horrible. So it's raining all the time.
Can we get a pass?
Can we get a pass to come back?
Yeah.
We both grew up there.
You guys are
okay. Yeah. Okay, good.
No, but it is an awesome place, and we can, you can be skiing powder at Mount Baker, or go climb ice at Mount Rainier, or go, run in the foothills, any time of year. And so that's, the other thing kind of about Seattle is, because the weather can be fickle, you do have to have, kind of a bag of tricks to be able to optimize, kind of the activity, and for me, one of the, you talked about kind of, just time constraints with training and family and work, that's kind of what has gotten me into the faster stuff, because, and that's why I love running, because, what most people would take 3 or 4 days to do, I can now do in a day. Like last year was great. We climbed Mount Olympus, which is normally like a 3 or 4 day climb. We climbed it in a day. Or, Glacier Peak, which is super remote, normally a 3 or 4 day deal. We skied it in a day, and that sort of stuff is like super exciting to me. So, that's what gets me really jazzed.
See, this is all really neat stuff, and just looking at your resume and hearing what you're talking about with you just mentioned Olympus, which is one of those Northwest classics in the Olympic mountain range. It is a 3-day sort of endeavor for most people. Do you pick your challenges based off of their difficulty? Your resume does not include the easy jaunts through a flat 50K or anything like that. It's almost like you picked and chose the most difficult versions of all these disciplines. Is there something that draws you to that? Is there something in completing those that gives you more fulfillment than a typical classic endeavor?
Well, I guess I've been fortunate to do a lot of the, the classics as well, and the 50Ks, like, and we're also really fortunate here. We have Rain Shadow Running, which I know you guys know well, and like James puts on awesome races, and so we've been able to do, and also in a way, like, it's family friendly, if you will, like Yakima 50K. Sure. Like, I ran the 50K on Saturday, and Sarah ran the 25K on Sunday, and we had our kids there, and we camped out, so like, and it's like every weekend there's an awesome, race. But, I kind of see all of those, and even the long things, as kind of training for the next thing. And, it's weird because, like, I didn't even, when I started getting into ultra running, I'd read basically Born to Run and Ultra Marathon Man. Those were the two things. And, like, especially, Dean, when he's talking about, bad water and things like that, I was like, oh man, like, that sounds terrible. Like, I totally want to do it,
You're right, exactly.
And so, and now I've been fortunate to have, done it. And it's just been, and I'm not big on like going and saying, hey, I'm going to go do this thing and everybody watch me. I just would rather kind of go do it and then, hopefully finish. And so, yeah, I like the longer things, and you learn, like, once you do one, then you learn more about like longer and longer stuff. I'd always heard about Arrowhead, 35, or I heard about Badwater, but then I heard about this thing Arrowhead, which is kind of like the sister race, but in Minnesota.
Complete opposite. Yeah.
Yeah. And so, I was, but I didn't know anything about winter racing, so I was able to do Susitna last year, and then as kind of a qualifier for Arrowhead this year. And then, it was really cool. I ended up winning Arrowhead, which was like awesome. But then I'm talking to people there, and they're like, "Oh, are you going to ITI? It's a 350-mile race. Oh, there's a 1,000-mile version as well up in Alaska." So then I'm like, "Wow, that sounds even cooler." So that's how this whole thing works. Is you think you're, doing like kind of a little bit crazy stuff, and then you hear about really crazy stuff.
I'm having a great time listening, but also a terrible time because everything he's talking about, I'm like, oh, well, maybe I kind of want to do that. Like, Mount Olympus, I'm still thinking about it and doing it in one day. Ooh, I kind of want to try that. Or Arrowhead 135. No, well, maybe. Yeah, you're our ultra marathon man right now, Gavin.
Yep.
Have you thought about writing a book? I mean, this is like completely off topic, but have you ever thought about writing a book? Because you have these adventures to pick and choose from.
I have. I just don't have time, to be honest. I mean,
Sure.
I mean, people have said that before, but I don't know. I kind of just like getting out and doing stuff. And but I mean, you've had amazingly accomplished athletes, on your show who are, really, winning things. And, I just feel like I'm kind of like, okay at many different things. And but that's what I like. I like to kind of piece things together. But it is interesting seeing especially the kind of the mountaineering world and the ultra running world coming together, right? So you have kind of Killian approaching it from the running and ski mountaineering side, and then Uli Steck approaching it from your traditional alpinist side, and kind of those two things coming together. And that's kind of where I think we're going to see a lot more. You see it like Nolan's 14 or
right
sorts of things where, but even higher and on, bigger routes. So I think there's a lot of opportunity there.
Lots of questions coming in, Kim.
Yeah, a lot of questions in the chat room. A question from Kim in the chat room. Gavin, what is your favorite organized race and why?
Might be a tough one for you, Gavin, but favorite organized race and why?
Well, I actually do different races all the time just because I like to experience different events. So I guess the only race I've done more than once, I think, is Chuckanut 50K, because it was my first one, and it's a great crew. I mean, Christy does a great job putting it on, and it's just it's a bit of a sufferfest at the beginning because of more at the end because of all the kind of gravel road, but and it's close by. So yeah, I just really love Chuckanut. And but yeah, I typically try to do different things, and also not do a ton of research ahead of time, just to get a full experience. So yeah, that's really hard to say. I've been fortunate to have done stuff all over the place. I mean, I guess one of the things, if I had say, one of the coolest experiences I had over the last few years was a race called Dragon's Back in Wales. And I thought it was going to be more like a trail race. Well, it actually turns out it's mostly off trail, and you have to navigate point to point. So it's 200 miles over 5 days, 5-day stage race. But it was amazing because you interact with so many people, because, people are coming up from one side of the mountain, the other side of the mountain. You kind of get up to a point, you're trying to figure out where to go, and you just interact with people. Whereas on a regular trail run, sometimes you're just kind of in your zone and you just have to mindlessly follow the trail. So that was super interactive and super fun. So not a lot of people know about Dragon's Back, but I actually found it because I looked, I mean, this is how my mind works. I think I Googled one time, the races with the lowest finishing percentage. And those are what to do. And Dragon's Back was the top one. I think when they ran it a few years ago, only 30% of the people finished the first day or something.
Wow.
So I want to do that.
That's awesome. And you did do it. You did finish it in 2015 in about 64 hours or something crazy like that?
Yeah, it was us. Sorry, this light.
It's okay. Villain's back. I know that Gavin can still hear us while he's getting the light situated, but let's get one more question, and we're going to start talking about GODZone, because I can't wait to hear about this.
So we're talking about navigating races. We're talking about tough races. There's lots of Barkley questions in the chat room.
Mm-hmm.
So is Barkley a bucket list race for you? Are you going to continue to apply until you get in? Is this something that's really important to you?
Yeah, I have applied for a few years and would love to go. Probably fail, just like most people do. And I'd love to give it a shot. So we'll see what happens.
Well, we're crossing fingers, legs, toes, everything like that for you to get in. I mean, we are very fortunate to know people that are there have or are participating in this event, and it's like, I mean, talk about tough, Gavin. Talk about tough. I really want to see Gavin do it. Now I don't want to ever go back until Gavin goes back. We're petitioning for Gavin to go. So I want to talk about GODZone before we talk a little bit about this. Gavin, you were gone for how many? I mean, this is a pretty big endeavor because not only does the event itself take place over a certain number of days, but you also took some vacation and some family time and stuff. How long were you in New Zealand, all?
Pretty much almost 3 weeks total. So, okay. I mean, just, the travel times, like, the better part of a day on either end, and then had to get there, prepare, and then the race was up to 7 days, and then I spent a week up in the North Island, out of Auckland with my wife, vacationing around. So, it was tough to be away from my kids or for that long, and for my wife, she was gone 10 days away from them, but they were with my mother-in-law and aunt. And I don't think the kids, I think they missed us, but they were having a ball. Wasn't too bad.
So let's talk a little bit about, sorry.
Oh, no, it was a long time to be away, especially, the adventure racing was just, this is really the second one I did. I did a 6-hour adventure race a few months ago. But this was so logistically intense. You had to bring mountain bike over, wetsuit, PFD, all the clothes, all the food, all that stuff. So it was hard. And then my bike didn't show up, or my
I remember reading that.
And so it was like, I'm glad I gave myself some buffer days at the beginning. So then when it did show up, I was happy.
We got one more question before we get into that.
Yeah, before we get in too deep, there's questions about is there a post show tonight?
Yeah.
So lots of people are asking about that.
Always.
There's I think, no link available.
Oh, yeah. Basically, for those of you who are asking about a post show, as always, I will post a link right before the post show. We have Gavin sticking around for that. So, yes, there's a post show for those of you who are Patreon supporters. If you are not, consider it. Go to patreon.com/thegingerrunner for as little as $1. You basically get access to all of our post shows with our special guests, as well as some additional content. And right now, you can even get access to A Decade On, which is the documentary I made about Brian Morrison's return to Western States, which is dropping on Friday to the public, but it's available to Patreon supporters right now. So yeah, we will be doing that, and we'll be posting the link for the post show right before the post show. So just to kind of set up GODZone and its level of difficulty. Gavin was gracious enough to share a couple videos. I'll show the first one, which I think is kind of it's more like a montage of some of the different things that Gavin had to go through. I can imagine that this doesn't even brush the surface of what this thing was about, but maybe it'll kind of set our palates. Here we go. What? It's like when Gavin sent me, or I saw him actually post this on Facebook a couple of weeks ago, or maybe a week and a half ago or something. It just seemed to me, especially like clip at the end there, that Gavin was just taking a GoPro and just shoving it into bushes. Yeah. Like there's no trail, there's no flagging or anything like that. Logistically, how does this work, Gavin? So this is a multi-discipline, multi-day, multi-stage sort of thing, or is it staged at all? Is it just point A to point B and you've got 6 or 7 days to do it? I mean, this is massive.
Yeah, I mean, navigation is, probably the most important skill on this. So again, team of 4, and 2 of the teammates, it was a husband and wife, and they've been doing a lot of adventure races, shorter stuff, but have done if starting to get into longer distance stuff, there's a thing, you guys know Bellingham. So one of my friends has started this thing, the Mount Baker, wanted to recreate the Mount Baker ultramarathon. So I took part in one of his like kind of test runs. So a few years ago, we ran from Bellingham and then went up to the summit of Baker and back. So it was 100 miles, but super, a lot of road, but super cool in terms of getting the full experience, kind of the bay to the summit.
We had that crew on after this year's event. Yeah. It was,
cool.
Sounds amazing. Sounds amazing.
Yeah. So it was, but anyway, so that's one of the couples. So Emily and Dusty, that was their first kind of 100-mile thing. But they'd done a lot of adventure racing. And then Richard Kresser, the other teammate, we have started to do a bunch of stuff together, like Olympus and Glacier, and he won Bigfoot the year after I did, and so and also an Army Ranger. We would be this exact same, except that he has like a lot of hair. They're also a lot younger than me. I'd just point that out. But yeah, so we had a great team, but had only done like a few trainings together. So I wasn't sure exactly how everything would gel, but it actually worked out super well. And yeah, you basically get some hints prior to the race about like approximate distances. We knew it would be about 300 miles of travel total, but we didn't know how all of it would play out. But ultimately, then kind of the day before the race, you get where the different checkpoints are going to be. So I think we had 27 checkpoints over the entire distance. And some of them were in really tight quarters and more kind of like an orienteering course it was actually a bike section. So we had to it was kind of very challenging to find these checkpoints. But then others were spread out over, 8 hours you'd be walking between checkpoints. But you could choose the route. And it turned out that there were times where there were no easy routes, especially on the treks. They were very, very steep and exposed, and just walking through these tussock fields, you can kind of get a sense in that first video. But the terrain in New Zealand is kind of similar to the Pacific Northwest in terms of the kind of the ruggedness of the mountains, but not a lot of trees. You have these tussocks, which is like a big piece of grass, but then in half of them are embedded these they're called Spaniards, but it's like a sharp yucca plant, and they hurt like hell. And so half the time you're trying to grab onto this tussock so you don't slip down the hill, but instead you jam your hand in these like Spaniards. So it was way more painful from that perspective than I expected, and more exposed than I expected, actually.
I mean, this other video that you sent, I think this might be a good chance to show that. You call it bike whacking, but I think it showcases some of those plants you're talking about having to push through. I mean, it's briars. It's just gnarly what you end up having to kind of go through. So I'll just show this clip, and we'll pick up right where Gavin left off here. It's insane. It's just so gnarly looking.
People in the chat room are saying that Gavin is built for Barkley based on.
That's what I'm thinking. I'm watching this going, yeah, Barkley, eat your heart out. GODZone is like next level. So sorry, Gavin, you can pick up where you were leaving off there. I interrupted.
Oh no, I was just saying that yeah, I mean, we could choose our route, and so that was actually something we took a bit of a risk on, choosing that particular route on the bike. So two teams, which we didn't know, but two teams attempted that route and then turned back around. I don't know if you could see, but down below us was water. It was kind of steep down there, and a couple of teams tried to go. I guess they didn't like the briars for some reason. So those bushes are called mataguri, and
Okay.
the Maori people back in the day used to use those as tattooing needles.
Oh God.
So here we're crashing through them. So it was, the first like 45 minutes, we're like, oh, this kind of sucks. Like, and after 4 hours, we're like, this was a really bad idea.
Wow.
And we really considered going down to the water, but it's to get away from these briars, but it's good we didn't, because that's what actually stopped a couple of teams that tried it, because they got, into neck deep water holding their bikes above their head, and then it cliffed out, and they just didn't want to, risk trying to get around this portion. So, we stuck with it, and we were really happy at the beginning. We thought like we'd made a good decision because the trail looked pretty good. And then we got into that stuff and we're like, we just totally screwed this up. It turns out it was kind of a wash, because when we made the decision to go that way, there were 2 other teams that were biking with us, and one team beat us and we beat one of the teams. So it was kind of like probably a wash. I mean, we had a better story, I guess, and more scratches.
Better footage.
Yeah, I don't know. So it was definitely kind of it was funny, because it was kind of what people were talking about at the end of the race, was the fact that we like made this, journey around. So that felt pretty cool.
I mean, just that opening shot, you can look down, and again, a GoPro will never do anything justice. It'll never do the steepness justice, cliffs, or, exposure. That opening shot, I'm looking at it going, I know that the GoPro is not doing that thing any justice, but that's straight freaking down. At any point, did you or your team doubt any of your decisions? Did you ever feel like you were in a position of no return or, major danger?
Not on that. I mean, there were a couple times on there where I'm like, don't drop my bike or else it's going maybe in the water way below. But there were a couple of times where we were in some pretty steep terrain that, we had to be extremely careful.
Mm-hmm.
And, it's one of those things where, it's not a stage race. I mean, you choose when to sleep or when to move fast, and so we didn't sleep the first night, and then we decided to sleep 3 hours the second night, and then 2 hours each subsequent night. So we got 5 or 7 hours total. And so, but you're always, trying to move quickly and efficiently, and also, be safe. And so, yeah, there were a few times where we're like, hey, this is it's going to be bad if we, slip off this thing, just because, and I'm used to kind of climbing here in the Pacific Northwest. We get lots of shale, and there was quite a bit of that. But but what I wasn't used to was just like grass, and like slippery grass and dirt, and just on a steep exposed slope, and that's it's just not sure footing.
Yeah,
so
pretty scrappy. Yeah.
So yeah, I guess I wasn't expecting that. I was more concerned about all the whitewater stuff, actually, because that's the stuff I'm not that well versed in. We did I've done some rafting and stuff over time, and but that's actually the thing I was mostly concerned about, was the paddling sections. But we did some, we were expecting some kind of class 3+ rapids. It turns out it was more like in probably the 2+ area, and so anyway, the rafting went fine. Although some teams we know got thrown out of their boats, got stranded on either side of the bank, and had to get rescued. And so there was all kinds of crazy stuff happening. But again, the whitewater stuff actually went really well for us. I was happy about.
Do you have conversations with your wife before you do adventures like this, just saying, I've got it all under control, I'll see you in a couple days? Or does she worry? I mean, how are those conversations?
I think she knows that I want to take care of myself, and I'm not going to expose myself to, anything beyond my ability. And, but yeah, she's always, telling me to be safe. And, I've got, I mean, especially with the 2 kids, I was thinking about them, and, making sure that I was making good decisions. But yeah, I mean, like, probably the riskiest thing I do is, backcountry skiing.
Yeah.
And, that's where, just kind of, it is what it is. The stuff that's the funnest to ski is the most dangerous. 35-degree slope is, the most prone to, avalanche danger. And that's the really fun stuff. So, that's where I, try to be, make good decisions. And a lot of it is who you choose, who you go out there with, and that's where, we were, from GODZone perspective, we were very compatible from kind of risk tolerance, and then when I go out in the mountains, that's probably the most important thing, is to choose people that, you can have open conversations with and have, similar mindset.
I'm also really curious. We're going to take a couple more live questions too, from the chat room that Kim's pulled aside here. But I'm also really curious what a low looks like for Gavin Woody. We've all faced some sort of lows in long races, whether it's a ultra marathon or even just marathons, right? We hit those walls, whether mental or physical, and having to push through them. Knowing Gavin's resume, which is stout, I'm really curious what a low looks like for Gavin. How do you get through that stuff, man? And did anything creep in during GODZone? Like, you're with a team in an event like this, so you have people like you just mentioned to kind of bounce off of. But were there any lows, or what does that look like?
Yeah, I think we all had, lows at certain points. There were times we were all basically dragging ass. And having the team aspect is huge, because you can, rely on, others to, just, crack jokes, or just, give you a little dose of motivation. And that's why, so yeah, some specific times, we had this one, section where we had to carry all of our we finished a paddling section and then had to carry all of our paddling gear as well. So wetsuits, PFDs, all of our kind of, and through some like super just bushwhacking, kind of like that the last part of that clip. It was like that, but with all of this other gear in addition to because our regular, our mandatory gear at all times was sleeping bag, bivy sack, stove, tent, four-person tent, so I'd carry that the whole time. Water, extra food. So there was mandatory stuff we had to carry, which is good because we used it all. And then in addition, all this stuff, and we were just going and through this like bushwhacking. It was super hot, and we had to carry this extra gear, and so it was just, we traded it on and off based upon who was feeling the best at any one particular time. So that was, so that's really where the team aspect came into play, and that helped a lot. But yeah, I've had some lows. Probably the thing that always, I always think about is on the John Muir Trail. I attempted to run it in maybe 2012, and I failed. I made it 160 miles and then pulled out at Red's Meadow. And I don't know if people know about that, but it goes from the Mount Whitney portal up to the summit of Mount Whitney, which is 14,500 feet. And then it goes over, 12,000 foot passes and 11,000 foot passes over 223 miles down to Yosemite. And I actually fell in love with this trail back as a Boy Scout. That was one of the kind of formative experiences of my life, was doing a 50-mile backpacking trip over a week and summiting Mount Whitney the last day. And it was amazing. I had this, I was 12 years old. I had this backpack, which was bigger than me. That was awesome. And then Sarah and I got married in Yosemite, and then hiked about 70 miles of the John Muir Trail for our honeymoon. So I saw that end of it, and I had thought for a long time, like, that would be really cool to piece that together. And so I'd, I guess in 2012 was kind of a big year. I think I'd run Western and then Dirty 100. And I think I did Pigtails 200 that year as well. And some other like it's just my own stuff. I ran from the Seattle waterfront up to Snoqualmie Pass, just unsupported, just with a backpack, which is 100 miles, just linking up.
So awesome.
That was like a super cool, like good, training exercise, just to see if I could do that. With just
along I-90. Like, did you cross the I-90 bridge?
Yeah, so across I-90 and then linked up like Coal Creek and Cougar and Tiger and Rattlesnake and then Defiance and Bandera and all that stuff. So it was super cool to like piece all that stuff together. But anyway, so getting back to the JMT, so I felt pretty strong going into that, but I hadn't acclimated to the elevation, and I'd had a little bit of a cold, and so anyway, I went off, and basically just the elevation just hit me really hard, and it's really rugged terrain. It's not very runnable, and I pulled out at Red's Meadow because I wasn't eating, and I learned that my wife and daughter were there, and it was our anniversary that night, and I was just feeling like underfed and underslept and lonely, and so I pulled out. And so, in hindsight, had they not been there, maybe I would have kept going, but it was still a good learning experience. And then went back 2 years later and ended up finishing. So that was, like that low of me really suffering on the JMT was, ultimately a good, good training. And so, I guess, when people ask, how do you get through those low points? I tend to think of things in terms of like, hey, I'm like a new low, and now I have this in my, hip pocket for when things get, bad again. I'm like, oh, I've been there before. Like, I know I can push through it. Mm-hmm. So that's how I kind of deal with David Goggins. I don't know if you know David Goggins, Navy SEAL.
Oh yeah.
Done bad water and all this stuff, but he calls it his cookie jar, and he, he reaches in the cookie jar and he can, pull out these experiences to get him back through. So I kind of tend to think of things when they're really bad as just kind of embracing it and saying, okay, now I know I can do that again.
That's awesome. That's awesome. I think that's something that we can all kind of take into account as we learn from our own experiences, and we can find ourselves in the situation, but use them as learning experiences. Mm-hmm. We have lots of live questions, so I'm going to make sure we get to a couple of these before we actually move to the post show. The post show, we're going to rapid fire through a bunch of these live questions. Mm-hmm. And for those who are on Patreon to support, if you have additional questions, we'll be able to get through those as well with Gavin. We're going to talk about nutrition in the post show, because I'm really curious, like how they survive, what they survived off at GODZone, and what Gavin tends to eat maybe as like a regular day diet versus race diet. But yeah, let's get to a couple here before moving to the post show.
Yeah, question from Wing in the chat room. Gavin, do you do orienteering races or events to keep your navigation skills dialed?
Oops, let me turn the light back on and I'll answer that. I'm not moving around in
the office. Yeah, right. You just got to do that. Yeah.
So I did a lot of nav in the Army, and so I have kind of a good baseline, and then Scouts, and then Army. So I have a pretty good baseline there. I have not done orienteering races here in the Pacific Northwest, although that's kind of something that I want to do. I wasn't the navigator at GODZone. I was the team captain, and so we had Richard. Was the backup navigator, and Dusty was the primary navigator. And so, even though I kept up with, generally where we were, they were really focused on, getting us from point A to point B, and I was trying to make sure that everybody was doing okay and we were moving as a team. So, but yeah, it's a skill that you can basically never be good enough at.
Right. Even just talking to our friend Gary, who's now prepping for Barkley right now, and just hearing all the orienteering that he's having to go through just for that element of thing, I can't imagine the wealth of knowledge that you need to have for that event, or for an event like GODZone, where you're traversing hundreds of miles through backcountry, untrailed back. I can't even fathom it. Let's get one more question in there.
Yeah, question from Kimosabi75.
Kimosabi.
Gavin, do you have a plan for races, or do you just show up and test the body and see how hard you can push the body?
I typically, I don't really go out to try to, win or to do well. I mean, my goal is really to try to finish. Like Arrowhead this year, I mean, I took 45, my sled weighed 45 pounds. I mean, I have had 2 rain jackets. I mean, I never wear rain jackets. I mean, but I, had tons of extra food, tons of extra gear, because we were supposed to get quite a bit of precipitation. And so it's in Minnesota, Arrowhead, for those who don't know it. I mean, it's gotten down to negative 40 degrees some years. So you have to, take a 20-degree sleeping bag. You have to take extra food. You have to take stove and all this other stuff. So, probably the minimum gear you could probably get by with like 15 pounds. But I had literally 45 pounds of stuff, because I was like, I'm going to finish this thing. I mean, that's goal number 1. And then, I just felt pretty good, and then just kept moving, and didn't end up sleeping, and kind of everybody else did a little bit. And so that's, I think, one of the things that helped me. I just kept moving, and was able to win. But yeah, I guess my normal thing is like, just try to finish, and try to just kind of keep moving forward, though, because I think a lot of times people can get too reliant on aid stations, or like, what gear is, am I going to change into, or whatever. Like, I try to just not rest a lot, but I'd rather move more slowly but continuously than like try to do the kind of the rabbit thing, run fast and then stop for a long time. So that's been my strategy.
The discussion in the chat room, just so you know, Gavin, has kind of moved to making Gavin like Chuck Norris, and I like this. It's really funny. Gavin doesn't wear rain jackets. His skin repels water. Gavin doesn't need sleep. He just waits. I love it. And there's no one, I mean, this guy is super deserving of this. So I think it's great that the chat room kind of went there. The chat room's very creative, Gavin, by the way. They're very funny, very creative. We have a lot of return people.
Yeah, I think somebody was like, Gavin is the Chuck Norris of ultra running. And then somebody else said, no, Chuck Norris is the Gavin Woody of Hollywood.
I think that's all. Yeah, let's see Chuck Norris do GODZone. I don't think that's possible.
Gavin Woody's car doesn't run on gas; it runs on fear.
Yeah, it's great. Gavin, shout out your crew that you participated GODZone with, and how long did it take you guys to finish?
So Dusty and Emily Casaria, and then Richard Kresser, and it took us, I think, 4 days and 11 hours, something like that, which is cool. We ended up coming in 10th out of 75 teams, which was, way better than we thought. We were thinking, I mean, given our background, we could do maybe, something in the 5-day range. I mean, that's what we planned for like a lot of our food and stuff. Like, we'd plan on kind of 6, with a little bit of a buffer. But yeah, I think we just we gelled well and kept moving. And, the team, I mean, they were all super strong, and it's just awesome to be with people who, like, I love, being with people who are better than me, because it pushes me to, learn from them. And, especially the kayaking. I mean, I'd never, so the last kayak section was a 50K. It was 30 miles of sea kayaking. I mean, I don't think I've done a combined 30 miles in a sea kayak in my life. And so, but these guys were super skilled, and, learning how to, be as efficient as possible. I love learning new stuff.
It's awesome. A huge congratulations to you and the whole crew. An incredible accomplishment. And again, I watch those videos and I just sit there like, what? What? Even just the rappelling off the bridge, self-rappelling, it's like, that's where I would die. I would kill myself. So thank you, Gavin, for coming on the show and telling us a little bit about yourself and your adventures. And we have a couple of things that we like to do with our first-time guests. And to our first-time guests, we have the quickie question quiz, which we're going to do with you here, which is just rapid-fire questions. First thing that comes to your head. So let me know when you're ready. Give me the thumbs up, and I'll just kind of whip through.
Okay, good.
All right, here we go. What was your very first race?
I guess the Marine Corps Marathon.
Favorite running movie? You're welcome to say this episode of Ginger Runner Live, because now it's my favorite.
This is a good one. Yeah, I guess I don't really have like a favorite running movie. I'm sorry.
It's okay. Ultra marathons or adventure races?
I kind of want to learn about the adventure race stuff. I like it.
Favorite place to run currently?
Tiger Mountain.
Bucket list race?
Barkley or Hard Rock. And Hard Rock.
There we go. Guilty pleasure TV show?
I don't watch TV.
I can't imagine you do.
I guess if there's one thing that I don't do, like I'm not part of mainstream society, is I just don't watch TV.
Favorite pre-race meal?
Probably spaghetti. Pretty easy.
Favorite post-race indulgence?
Beer.
And finally, what are your current running kicks?
La Sportiva Cautious.
Nice choice. That's it. Super easy. You passed. So thank you, Gavin Woody, for joining us on this main show. Reminder to those who are watching live, or even if you're watching the archive or listening to the archive, you can always join us for the post show with Gavin, where we kind of go through all the questions, and there's a more intimate audience, so you get your questions answered very quickly by joining us at Patreon. So go to patreon.com/thegingerrunner. For as little as $1 a month, you help support both Kim and myself, this channel, all of our films, all of our reviews, everything. It's all publicly funded by you guys, the viewers. So it's much like PBS, but with less Sesame Street, which we should change that.
No, right?
Okay. Definitely Cookie Monsters, but that's about it. So thank you, everyone, for tuning in live tonight for episode number 157. We'll be back next week with the Chuckin' at 50K post show. I'll be recapping the race, but I'll be back in LA by that point. Yes. So both Kim and I will be here. And again, also, Gavin, thank you very much for your service. We talked very briefly about it at the beginning of the show, but we bow to you and like are in awe of your accomplishments and everything that you've done. And thank you for everything, man. Really, really appreciate it.
Well, thank you. Thanks for having me.
You got it, man. So we're going to move into the post show. So Patreon supporters, jump on over to that side and you'll see the link there. It's all good. And thank you, everyone else. Get out there, train hard, race harder, and party the hardest.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, guys.